"27 years in construction, and one thing I know is that anything that can go wrong will go wrong. It keeps the job interesting. I always find something new, something strange, something I haven't planned for but can learn from. Always expect the unexpected is my motto. And I was not expecting what happened. I'm a foreman, have been since my 30s. This project was typical city revitalization bullshit. Old warehouses and dead storefronts they were tearing down, putting in some hipster thing. Retail on the ground floor with apartments stacked on top. The whole block had been abandoned long enough that animals had claimed it. Raccoons in the storm drains, feral cats everywhere, rats the size of small dogs. Par for the course in that part of town. Demo started fine. Then about 3 weeks in, someone tore the lock off of one of our storage sheds. And I mean tore. It wasn't cut with bolt cutters, not pried off with a crowbar either. Just twisted apart like aluminum foil. Inside, a couple of power tools looked like they'd been put through a shredder. A few days later, hydraulic lines on the excavators were sliced clean through. That's when the money started adding up, and people finally started caring. But the earth mover is what made it weird. Someone, something, had raked 4 deep gouges down the side panel. Steel panel, mind you, thick enough you'd need serious equipment to damage it. These gouges were parallel, angled, deep enough to see fresh metal underneath. There was no paint transfer or tool marks that made sense. You don't do that with a blade. You also don't do it quietly. First assumption was protesters, eco-activists, anti-gentrification types, hippies, or somebody with a grudge. We checked with the city and there were no permits for demonstrations, no complaints filed, and nothing on social media. But people sabotaged construction sites for the dumbest reasons, so we weren't ruling it out. We already had cameras up along with a night watchman, a semi-retired guy who drove around in a golf cart doing his rounds. Fat lot of good either did us. Cameras would glitch out or get smashed. The watchman would hear noises, metal banging, something moving fast between the equipment. But every time he got there, the culprit, or culprits, were already gone and the damage was done. Nothing ever happened during the day. Whoever was doing this waited until everyone was gone. That's why the boss is thinking it was protesters. Never made any sense in my mind. I ended up going back to the site one night because I'm an idiot who'd left my kid's birthday present in my trailer. It was a toy he'd been asking for. I'd grabbed it during my lunch break and forgot to take it home. Got there around 8. Site was quiet, lights on, and the watchman was near the gate. I stopped to talk to him, mostly checking in, making sure he wasn't falling asleep on the job. He said it'd been dead quiet. No noises, movement, or alerts from the cameras that were still working. I walked to my trailer, grabbed the present, and then came back out. That's when I heard the bang. It was metal on metal and loud. I looked around for the watchman, but couldn't find him. I called out and got no response. Then I heard something else. A rattling sound like someone dragging chain link fence across concrete. Look, I'm not a hero. I don't carry a piece. But I've got a lot of expensive equipment sitting out there, and I'm responsible for it. So I told myself I'd take a look, stay in the shadows, get a description, and call the cops if I needed to. I moved slow. The noise continued to come in bursts. Scraping, silence, scraping. Then this wet rooting sound like an animal going through garbage. I followed it toward the row of connexes we were using for storage. I came around the corner of one container and looked. What I saw made me go limp. The present fell out of my hands and hit the gravel. The thing must have heard it, but it didn't even flinch. All I can tell you is it was white. A kind of pure white I don't ever think I've seen before. Its skin looked wet, almost glossy under the side lights. stretched tight like a rubber suit. It was crouched on all fours, shoulders hunched, moving with this rolling motion that made me think it was mechanical at first. I couldn't see its face. It was half hidden behind an open container door, digging through something inside. All I had was its back and its shoulders. The way the joints bent didn't look natural, and I was wondering how it could move without hurting itself. It was completely silent, which also unnerved me. Animals breathe heavy when they're working. This thing didn't make a sound except for metal scraping and whatever it was tearing through. I stood there like a moron, waiting for it to turn around so I could see what it was, hoping that would fill in the blanks and it would all make sense. Then the watchman screamed, high and panicked, making the sound of a man who's seen something his brain doesn't understand. He was yelling for it to stop. That broke the spell I was in, and I saw it move fast in this liquid motion I can't quite explain. In a blink of an eye, it disappeared behind stacked equipment, like water going down a drain. I heard clattering, then silence. The watchman came running up 10 seconds later, breathing like he'd sprinted a mile, eyes so wide I could see white all around. That's when I stepped out from behind the container. I must have looked half dead myself, because he didn't even ask what I was doing there. We compared notes fast. He'd seen movement and white skin, that was it. Like me, he had seen nothing useful. Inside the container, we found what it had been after. A bag of chips torn open and crushed. Candy bar wrappers too. One of my guys had been stashing snacks to eat during his shift. The lock on the container was destroyed, same as all the others. No claw or bite marks, simply twisted metal, like something had grabbed it and wrenched it apart with its hands. The watchman filed his report. I didn't add anything. There was nothing useful I could add. Next morning, I pulled aside the two guys I trusted most and had them search every container, every vehicle, every storage space on site. We found food stashed everywhere. Lunches, snacks, energy drinks, half-eaten sandwiches. I banned all food on site immediately. Lunches stayed locked in personal vehicles. Anyone caught breaking the rule was fired, no second chances. The vandalism stopped that day. No more broken locks, no more cut hydraulic lines, no more damaged equipment. Cameras stopped getting smashed. The watchman's reports went back to quiet night, no incidences. I didn't tell anyone what I saw. Not the crew, not my boss, not even my wife. Sometimes, late at night, I listened to podcasts to help me sleep. True crime, paranormal stuff, or cryptid investigators. I used to think it was all entertainment, but you start noticing things if you pay attention. I think I know what it was. I also know what happens when you tell people you saw something like that. They look at you differently. They start thinking maybe it's time for you to retire. So I keep my mouth shut. But I don't let anyone leave food on my sites anymore. Not ever. Never thought I'd actually have any kind of story like this to tell. But here we are. This happened about 2 years ago when I was 24 and working a gig for a private road paving company out in the middle of nowhere. I won't say exactly where, but think like 80 miles from the closest Walmart and only one blinking yellow light in the whole county. We were doing a massive stretch of state highway, basically ripping up and repaving 10 miles of road that hadn't been touched since the 70s. The company had to split up to speed things along. We had the South crew and the North crew. I was on the North crew that night. We were pushing hard because a big storm was coming in a few days, and the boss wanted the stretch done before the rain hit. My job is what they call the loop man, or sometimes smooth operator, which is a laugh because it's anything but smooth. I walk behind the asphalt paving machine, right in front of the massive roller. My job is to use a large aluminum lute. It looks like a giant rake with a straight edge. to scrape off any excess material, fill in small divots, and make sure the seam where the new asphalt meets the old is nice and even before the roller mashes it flat. It's hot, heavy, and loud work. The noise is the first thing you notice when you're paving at night. It's overwhelming. You got the screaming diesel engine of the paver, the rhythmic thump-thump of the roller compacting the fresh mat, the generator running the work lights, and then the backup beepers. You can't hear yourself think, and you certainly can't hear much else. Add to that the smell, pure hot asphalt. It smells like oil or like burnt tires. It stings the inside of your nose, and you're used to it after about 10 minutes on the job. But that night, about an hour into the shift, I started catching something else. It slowly drifted in, but it cut right through the asphalt fumes, and that takes some serious stink. It was metallic, like someone left a rusty bucket of old pennies in a damp basement, mixed with rotten meat. Not just dead raccoon rotten, but putrid rotten, like something had crawled into the woods and cooked for a week in the summer sun, only with a different, sickly sweet edge to it. I was too busy at first to really focus. You can't stop when the paver is laying. You keep moving, keeping the rhythm. I must have smoothed out over 300 feet of lane before the paver stopped to wait for the next truck to dump. I leaned the lute against the side of the paver and grabbed my water bottle. I asked Frank, one of the ground men, if he smelled what I was smelling. I had to yell over the idle of the roller. Frank shrugged, spitting a mouthful of dip into the darkness. He said some deer probably got clipped and dragged itself into the ditch. Said they can smell like a dumpster fire after a few days in the sun. Another guy, older fella by the name of Jerry, nodded. He said, "Happens out here all the time, kid. Don't think about it. Just means you got roadkill to look forward to when you get the lights set up in the morning." They totally brushed it off, but I know what roadkill smells like, and this wasn't it. Roadkill is sharp and gamey. This was thick and heavy, and it came and went with a slight breeze that drifted across the open fields on the west side of the road. We finished laying that particular stretch of the binder course, and the paver was idling while another truck backed up to fill the hopper again. The noise was cranked up to maximum, and the heat was intense. I took a quick glance over into the field that was just beyond the ditch. It was dark, maybe 50 feet past our bright work lights, and a few patches of tall late summer corn stalks were waving faintly. That's when I saw it, just a flash of what I thought was black or very deep brown fur, moving parallel to the road, maybe 20 or 30 yards out. It wasn't running upright. It was hugging the earth, almost like a coyote, but covering ground way too quickly. My first thought was a big cougar. We get them in these parts, but it's really weird for any animal to come that close to all the noise and light. Cougars are quiet and smart. They avoid humans. This thing was right there with us. I waited a second, thinking I might see it again, but it was gone, swallowed up by the darkness in the corn. I walked up to the foreman, a guy named Rick, who was usually pretty cool, but he was stressed about the incoming weather. I kept my voice low so I didn't freak out the whole crew. "Rick, listen," I said. "I saw something out in that field. Kinda looked like a mountain lion, but it was moving weird. Maybe we should just keep an eye out." Rick rubbed the back of his neck, glaring at the paver. "It's a possum, kid, or a coyote. Everything out here is scared to death of us. It'll run off. Just focus on that seam. We gotta hit this lift before 2 a.m. I let it go. Rick was a good guy, but he was practical to a fault. I did my job, but I was jumpy. The smell was definitely still there, maybe fading a bit, but it would hit you in a wave every time the breeze shifted. It was making my stomach start to turn. Around 1:30 a.m., we had successfully laid the whole lane of asphalt, and the finish rollers were doing their passes. I was done with the loop for a bit and needed to take a break. I also needed to badly take a leak. The porta potties were placed maybe 100 yards back from the worksite, off the road and tucked slightly behind a storage trailer. It felt like walking into a black void after spending hours under those halogen lights. I fumbled with the latch and went in. The moment I closed the plastic door, the smell came back. But this time it was 10 times worse. It was overwhelming, like the metal and rotten meat odor was concentrated right there in that little blue box. I swore I could taste it. I finished as fast as humanly possible and burst back out into the night air, trying to clear my lungs of the stench. I spun around, looking back towards the road, and that's when I saw it. It was standing maybe 20 feet away, just inside the tree line, watching the crew. The noise of the machinery was constant, so no one up the road had any clue it was there. And I don't think it saw me. It was totally fixed on the lights and the activity. Maybe trying to figure out what was going on, or maybe just watching its next meal. It looked like a dog, but not any kind of dog you or I have ever seen. I'm a dog guy. I have a Great Dane at home, a big solid monster of a dog. This thing made my Dane look like a house cat. It was easily 6 or 7 feet long from nose to tail, and it was on all fours. Its back was arched slightly, its head was low, and it looked like it was powered by a muscle car engine. The fur was dark, almost black, and matted or greasy looking, just soaking up the minimal ambient light. What struck me was the sheer brutal density of it. It wasn't tall like a horse, but it had incredible mass. Its limbs looked too thick for a wolf, and its head, even at a distance, was massive, heavy, and held low on its shoulders. It sat there, completely motionless, maybe taking in the scene. I was frozen, just out of the light spill, and I felt like I couldn't move or breathe without drawing its attention. Then it did something that confirmed to me this wasn't just a big bear or a weird wolf. It lifted its head and its snout pointed straight up, sniffing the air with quick, powerful intakes of breath, like it was trying to pinpoint a specific scent. Maybe it caught a whiff of me. Maybe it caught a whiff of whatever the hell that rotten metal smell was, which I swear was coming from it. Then, faster than anything I've ever witnessed, it dropped its head and vanished into the darkness of the tree line. Like a shadow being pulled away by a string, it didn't make a sound. I scrambled back to the lights, grabbing my loot and trying to act normal. I had a bad feeling that crawled right under my skin and stayed there for the rest of the shift. I would catch that metallic rotten odor every now and then, but I never saw the thing again. We finished the job by the end of the week, and I was glad to be done. I don't know what it was. It was too big for any known canine, too stocky for a cougar. Has anyone else working deep rural construction or late-night road work ever seen anything like this? I'm leaning toward Dogman werewolf territory, but it was 100% on all fours, and the way it sniffed the air and bolted just makes me think of some kind of super predator. Kinda wish I'd told Rick, but he would have just thought I was sleep deprived. Let me know if you guys have any similar experiences or even a reasonable explanation. I've always thought there had to be something out there. Now I know there is. My double wide sits 3 lots in from the main road, in the same spot it's been in for the past 18 years. Most of the trailers here are older than mine, and you can tell. Some of them have sagging porches, rust stains, or tarps on their roofs that were supposed to be temporary 5 years ago. It's like no one takes pride in their things anymore. I keep mine well, and have a little yard and even a garden out back. The park backs up to a pond, maybe 200 yards from my place. Past that, it's swamp and pine forests that go on forever. We get the usual critters: possums, armadillos, coyotes sometimes. Raccoons are the worst, but you deal with it. I'm 63. I've been dealing with it. About 3 weeks ago, things started getting weird. First, it was my trash cans. I'd put them out by the road Tuesday nights for pickup, and I'd wake up Wednesday morning to find them knocked over. Lids off, little bits of garbage everywhere. I figured raccoons at first, but raccoons make a mess. They tear bags open, scatter things around. The cans, as I found them, were just tipped over, lids sitting a few feet away like someone had lifted them off and set them down. The bags inside were torn, but only in one or two places. And like I said, the garbage was a little bit. It mostly spread out because the wind took it. I started bringing the cans in at night, but that didn't help. Whatever it was started tipping over the ones I kept by my back steps. These ones had bungee cords holding the lids on. Those cords would get stretched out like taffy. I don't even know how strong you'd have to be to pull cords to death like that. In the 3 weeks this happened, I went through 6 straps trying to keep them closed. Next, I started noticing the prints. There's a muddy patch between my trailer and the Johnson's place where the ground never really dries out. I was taking the recycling to the bins one morning and saw them, tracks in the mud that didn't add up. They were bigger than my hand, 4 toes, maybe 5, spread out wide. Deep impressions like whatever made them was heavy. Between the toes, you could see some kind of webbing. Thought it was a genetic mutation, like how humans can have webbed fingers. I figured the same thing could happen to some animals or something. I mentioned it to Carol next door. She's lived here longer than me, raised 3 kids in that beat-up single white of hers. She told me the wildlife had been acting strange lately. Her cat wouldn't go outside after dark anymore, and she'd been hearing noises at night she couldn't place. She couldn't describe them well, but then said it must have been a good year for the frogs since they'd been louder than usual. I didn't think much on it more after that. Then 2 nights ago, I heard my trash cans go over again. It was late, past midnight. I'd been watching TV with the volume low because I can't sleep like I used to. I heard the crash, then I sat there for a minute annoyed. I'd just bought new bungee cords again, heavy-duty ones. I figured I'd go out and scare it off, make some noise, maybe throw something at it. I put on my outside slippers and went out. When I opened the door, I didn't see anything at first. Both cans were tipped over, one of them on its side with the lid 10 feet away. I stood there on my back steps for a second, listening but didn't hear a thing besides the crickets. I walked over and right at the cans, picked up the lids, started shoving garbage back into the torn bags because I wasn't about to leave it out there for the ants. The whole time I'm thinking about what kind of animal has the strength to snap bungee cords. I was heading back to the steps when I saw them, 2 reflections off to my left, at the edge of the trees about 15 feet away. Something was catching the light from my porch lamp. They were high up, 3.5, maybe 4 feet off the ground, the size of tea saucers. I stopped walking, squinted at them. Initially, I couldn't place them. Thought maybe one of the neighbors put up new reflectors in their backyard or something. It didn't occur to me that they could be eyes until I saw them blink, top to bottom, like a curtain being drawn. It slowly dawned on me what they were. I could make out the cornea, then the pupil, then the iris. The realization startled me and I jumped. Must have spooked it because that's when whatever it was moved. The eyes, I'm calling them eyes because I don't know what else to call them, turned away. And when they did, the porch light caught the back of the thing. It was bright green, almost fluorescent in the yellow light, shiny and wet looking. The surface had this texture I can't quite describe, smooth but bumpy, like bubble wrap pulled tight. I saw the shape of it for maybe 2 seconds, broad across the back, narrowing at the bottom, hunched forward. I think it had been on 2 legs because I saw it go down at first, and then it hopped. A single powerful jump that took it into the darkness past the tree line. I heard it land somewhere in the distance. Then a few moments later, I think it was in the pond because there was a faint splash. That was the last thing I heard from it. There was no more splashing after that, just silence. I went back inside, locked the door, sat at my kitchen table for an hour trying to calm myself down with a cup of tea. Next morning I told Carol about it. Figured she'd have some insight. or at least understanding why I was rattled. She laughed, said it sounded like I'd seen a little green alien, and maybe I should get my meds checked. I only take a blood pressure pill and they don't cause hallucinations. But I didn't argue with her. I laughed it off and told her I couldn't get one over on her, it seemed. I don't think I saw an alien. I'm not saying that. I'm saying I saw something and I don't know what it was. Some kind of animal. It has to be. But I can't place it. So I'm asking, as an old woman, has anyone else seen something like this? Big reflective eyes, green shiny skin, moves by hopping. I've lived in East Texas my whole life and I've never seen anything like it. I'm an ornery cuss and I don't make things up. But whatever was in my trash that night, it wasn't a raccoon. Okay, first off, I'm posting this here because I've already been to the mechanic who found nothing wrong. And if I told my buddies in the unit, they'd assume I was on crack or something. This is a 100% genuine experience, and I need to know if anyone else has dealt with this specific combination of electrical chaos and visual phenomena, especially in the Appalachian regions. A little background. I'm 22, in the Army, just finished AIT, and this was my first official leave. I'm a single soldier, no family near base, so my first priority was getting back home to see my parents and my sister. The drive is brutal, over 12 hours from base to my hometown in North Carolina. I decided to tackle the back half of the drive late Thursday night to avoid traffic, which put me into the mountain highways of what I'm going to vaguely call West Virginia, or Virginia around 11 p.m. My car is nothing fancy, a 2012 Honda Civic. I've never had any problems with it before, and I keep it up on a regular schedule. I do all the work myself, so I know if anything is wrong with it. I still had about 4 hours to go, and the road was pitch black and completely empty. I hadn't seen another pair of headlights or taillights in maybe 30 minutes. I was running on Monster Energy and hitting my vape every 5 minutes just to keep my eyes glued to the road. It was lonely driving, the kind where your mind starts to wander and play tricks on you. The weirdness started subtle. I was listening to my driving metal playlist on my phone that was connected to the Bluetooth. The music started cutting out with these sudden sharp bursts of static, like a radio station was trying to bleed through. I instinctively reached for the tuner. Wait, I thought, I'm streaming from my phone. There wasn't a broadcast signal to interfere with. I checked the connection. Everything seemed fine. The music would play perfectly for 30 seconds, then crackle and screech, followed by silence, then come back. This went on for 5 minutes, and I was getting seriously annoyed, thinking I had to shorten the speakers. I manually turned the entire radio off and reset my phone to see if that would help. 5 minutes later, the radio turned back on, and my phone must have auto-reconnected, because music came back blaring through super loud. I hit the power button again, harder this time as if that would do anything different, and it stayed off. That was the first time the hair stood up on my arms. Then my phone, which was mounted on the dash and charging, went dark. It flashed the logo and did a complete reset without me touching it again. It took forever to boot back up this time. By this point, I was thinking less about a short and more about my car being haunted. A while after all that, my headlights started to dim, slowly pulling back to a weak yellow glow, and then they'd suddenly snap back to full bright white. It went dim, bright, dim, bright. They weren't flickering, but flashing low and high. I was running a mental checklist trying to figure out what could be causing all of this to happen. I couldn't come up with a single answer. I decided I needed to get off the road at the next exit, which, based on the map I had checked earlier, was probably an hour away. The idea of driving 4 more hours with a car that was actively trying to kill its own battery was stressing me out. Then, just as suddenly as it all began, it all stopped. The radio stayed off, the phone stayed on, and the headlights stabilized. I pushed the speed up a bit, hoping it was just a temporary glitch caused by crossing some weird magnetic field or something. I drove for another 30 minutes in silence, feeling like I had just passed a huge invisible tripwire. Then the engine cut out. It happened as I was taking a very sharp downhill curve, one that would require attention even if the car was working right. The engine cut off and the car went dead silent. The loss of power steering was what nearly made me lose it. The wheel was practically non-responsive. I don't know if anyone has driven a car without power steering, but it's not easy, especially when the turn is working against you. It took everything I had to keep it on the road and not to go into the other lane. I was able to take the turn, and at the bottom of the hill I coasted onto the shoulder. I was shaking, realizing how lucky I was not to have kissed a guardrail, or even worse, have a car come up the other side. I put the transmission in park and sat there for a minute, doing some deep breathing before grabbing my flashlight and popping the hood. I got out and started tracing the cables, looking for anything frayed or burnt. I must have been so rattled when the car died that I forgot to turn the key to the off position. I was leaning over the engine, shining the light on the battery terminals, when the car suddenly jumped back to life. The starter didn't even grind, it just instantly hit full power. The engine roared, the fan kicked on, and the radio, which I had manually turned off, was now back on, blasting the music from my phone. Man, I jumped so high I saw my head on the hood. I hit it so hard I was seeing spots. Without finding an obvious cause, I knew I couldn't fix anything there, and my best hope was to get somewhere safe fast. I was about to jump back in when I heard it. It was a low hum, like being right underneath a bunch of power lines. Except there were no power lines anywhere near the road. I looked around the darkness above me with the flashlight, but there was just thick mountainous forest. Then the hum stopped, replaced by a sound that made me wish I had a gun with me. It was a piercing metallic screech. It sounded like steel being ripped in half. I didn't wait around for a second more. I jumped into the car, slammed the door, threw it into drive, and peeled rubber off the shoulder. I was doing 85 miles per hour on winding mountain roads, terrified of what I might find if I stayed put. I drove fast for almost 45 minutes with the car behaving perfectly like nothing ever happened. Then my headlights started that dim bright cycle all over again. I wasn't going to take any more chances. I eased off the gas immediately, slowing down to about 40 miles per hour, bracing for the engine to stall. As I did, the lights went back to full brightness and lit up the road well. And that's when I saw it. It was a black shape in the sky. I'd say about as big as a Cessna or a small military transport, but it was all black, a silhouette against the already dark sky. It didn't have any navigation lights, strobes, or red or green markers. It was just a big void. It was gliding, and then it swooped down toward the tree line, covering about half a mile in a second. And then, without losing any momentum, it pulled straight up, rocketing vertically into the night sky until it completely disappeared above the canopy. It moved with a speed and grace I've never seen. The wingspan on this thing, and I could see it had wings, was larger than any bird I've ever seen. I'm not ruling out it wasn't a bird though, because I know some are massive, but still, I don't think it was because of how big it had to have been. I pulled over again and sat there for 5 minutes scanning the sky. It never came back, and all those strange noises didn't start up again either. My car behaved perfectly for the remaining 3 hours of the drive home. I took the car to my family's mechanic 2 days later. He spent a few hours on it, checked the battery, the alternator, the wiring harnesses, the radio, the ECU, and all the relevant fuses. His summary: 0 issues. Everything looks factory perfect. I don't know if the black shape and the car problems are connected, But the fact that the electrical chaos only started again right before the sighting and immediately stopped after the thing disappeared is too much of a coincidence for me. Was I dealing with some kind of huge winged cryptid? Maybe a Mothman variant or a monstrous thunderbird, and its presence was actively messing with my car's electronics? Did anyone else driving through the Appalachians see this thing or experience electromagnetic interference like this? You have been watching Neon Noir, a Radion production brought to you by Trapper Dan, the finest in canned survival food.